There are moments in American political history that stop you cold. Moments where the camera catches something so raw, so deeply human, and so profoundly disturbing that no political spin in the world can clean it up. What you are about to read is one of those moments. A man is dead, not a criminal, not a threat, not a danger to anyone around him. A nurse, an ICU nurse who spent his working life inside a Veterans Affairs hospital, caring for the men and women who gave everything to this country, who held their hands through pain and fear, who showed up every single shift with compassion as his only weapon. His name was Alex Prey. He worked at the Minneapolis VA Medical Center. He was known by his colleagues as a calm presence in the middle of chaos, a mentor, a caretaker, a man who genuinely wanted to make a difference. The father of one veteran he cared for until the end called him the sweetest person you can imagine.
He was remembered as a mentor, a caretaker, and someone who wanted to make a difference in the world. The father of one veteran, Mr. PRETTI, cared for until the end, described him as the sweetest person you can imagine.
And in his last minutes on this earth, Alex Prey was not doing anything wrong. He was not carrying a weapon. He was not threatening anyone. He saw a woman being assaulted by federal agents and he tried to help her. And then those same federal agents shot him and killed him in broad daylight. What followed his death may be even more shocking than the death itself. Within hours, before any investigation, before any facts had been established, before his family had even had time to grieve, the Trump administration went on the offensive. Cabinet officials called him a domestic terrorist, called him an assassin, spread narratives about what he was holding and what he was doing that were contradicted by video footage that the entire country had already seen with their own eyes.
We had other cabinet officials call him a domestic terrorist and an assassin, based on your access to the information you have in the VA and in front of 460,000 VA employees. Was this man, in your estimation, a domestic terrorist or an assassin?
And sitting before the United States Senate was Douglas Collins, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, the man who was supposed to be the protector and advocate of the 460,000 employees under his watch, including Alex Prey. What the senators who faced him that day demanded was simple: accountability, honesty, and basic human decency toward a man who gave his life in service to others. What they got instead was deflection, careful language, and political cover. This is that hearing. This is that confrontation. And what it reveals about power, truth, and the treatment of American citizens in 2025 will leave you breathless.
Now, I want to turn to the topic my colleagues have been talking about, which is Alex Preti, your employee, the ICU nurse who was killed over the weekend by Border Patrol. You said in your opening statement that you weren't able to engage on this topic, but you did engage on this topic. It took you 30 hours to put something out on Twitter about his death. First, you put out something with penguins in Greenland, but then you put out a statement that said, quote, "Such tragedies are unfortunately happening in Minnesota because state and local officials' refusal to cooperate with the federal government to enforce the law and deport dangerous illegal criminals." Was Alex Preti's death the result of the mayor of Minneapolis or the governor of Minnesota?
Alex Preti's death was a tragedy, as I've stated, and I will continue to stand by that statement.
Okay, but you put it out under official VA Twitter, right? This wasn't like your personal opinion. You weighed in and said why he died. And let me just ask, right? He was your employee. You know that people who work for the VA can't just walk in. They're vetted. They're properly vetted. We had other cabinet officials call him a domestic terrorist and an assassin, based on your access to the information you have in the VA and in front of 460,000 VA employees. Was this man, in your estimation, a domestic terrorist or an assassin?
What I have said about this as being a tragedy, I will continue to say, and I'm not going to make a characterization on something someone else said.
It's not. You said that it was the result of local officials blocking their access. You said it. It's not someone else. So if you can't say
I made no characterization about Mr. Preti.
You said that his death was the result of, quote, state and local officials' refusal to cooperate with the federal government. Not my words, yours. So you are prejudicing this investigation. You are weighing in on what you think happened. And I just think in front of the employees who have been through a lot this year, that you should at least be able to say to his family that he's not a domestic terrorist or an assassin. Right? People have eyes. They see the video there. And I think we owe him more than that. But to say that you can't engage on it, to say that now that Donald Trump has told the cabinet that now it's okay to have an independent investigation, and all, Secretary Noem and Stephen Miller have to walk back what they've said about this poor man in front of his family. Now I think you can admit that you joined them in prejudicing the investigation of your own employee. And now, can I ask, I understand there was some sort of memorial event yesterday that was held at the VA in Minnesota. Can you say clearly that neither you nor your senior officials tried to stop that memorial from happening?
We did not.
Okay, because there's an email circulating online right now that says that they were told not to have the memorial and the people went ahead anyways. So I hope that when this email comes out, there's not any of you sitting at this table who had anything to do with the fact that they wouldn't be able to celebrate the life of a man who was killed. Can you speak to that?
I can. I've seen the email. That email did not originate from my office or anybody sitting at this table's office. That came from a leadership official in Minneapolis.
And so he just woke up, the man who, or man or woman, I don't know, who employed this man, who's dealing with all kinds of fallout and, terrible feeling when people lose that person just woke up and just decided to say that someone else, the higher ups, told her not to have this memorial. She just made that up?
I don't know that she made it up, but I can't tell you what her perception of anything was. But what I can say is that we have been supportive in an appropriate time to be able to have a period for their employees to memorialize Alex PRETTI. And they did that yesterday with almost 400 people.
Well, I hope
at noon, which was scheduled.
You see how it takes a suspension of disbelief to believe that the woman who is the supervisor of this poor man said that higher-ups told her that she couldn't have a memorial. It seems a little hard to believe, but I yield my time. I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I begin my questions, people across America are really reeling from the horrifying murder of Alex PRETTI by federal agents. And as we all know, Alex PRETTI was an ICU nurse at the Minneapolis VA Medical Center. He is remembered by colleagues and friends as a calm presence amid the chaos of the hospital, someone who cared deeply for the veterans he served. He was remembered as a mentor, a caretaker, and someone who wanted to make a difference in the world. The father of one veteran Mr. PRETTI cared for until the end described him as the sweetest person you can imagine. Alex PRETTI spent his last minutes trying to help a woman. She was a bystander who was being assaulted by federal agents. He was killed by those federal agents moments later. Immediately after he was killed, the Trump administration began spreading sickening lies about him. They lied about who he was, what he was holding, what he was doing in the moments before his death. Trump and the miserable folks at the DHS showed right away they didn't care about getting the facts, any facts. They told Americans not to believe what we all saw and heard with our own eyes and ears. We all saw an American shot and killed by federal agents in broad daylight. Mr. Secretary, your initial response to a VA nurse being killed by federal agents was to blame it on Minnesota officials. You didn't say a word about who Alex PRETTI was or the incredible work that he did for veterans. You mentioned him today, but still didn't refer to that. That is certainly a choice. Words cannot describe how outraged I am and how outraged we all should be at the killing of Alex PRETTI, who simply did not have to die, and at this administration's rush to spread lies about American citizens whose only crime was peacefully exercising their First Amendment rights. Joining ICE or Border Patrol doesn't give you a license to murder. So I want to reiterate to all of you that there must be an independent investigation and real accountability here. This can't continue, and I hope that we agree on that basic point, and Republicans join us to work with us to make that happen. But Mr. Secretary, I wanted to ask you today, It is my understanding that Minneapolis VA employees have not been granted personal leave to mourn their colleague because they're subject to mandatory overtime due to staffing shortages. Are you allowing any of the employees there to get personal help, to take any time off, or to offer them your support as they go through a very trying time of losing a very close colleague?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, we are providing all that we can through the Minneapolis VA to those workers, and I will have Greg Goins, who's been in contact with them, discuss that.
Not only did we have conversations the day that this actually occurred, it also has happened every day since it's occurred. All the resources that we offer our federal employees when times like this occur, these tragedies occur, they're offered employee assistance programs, they're offered whole health employee assistance programs, they're also offered things through community partners if necessary. If anybody comes forward to want to take leave because of a coworker, a close coworker, we always have empathy in allowing them to do so. In fact, the very first contact that was made in that medical center was with ICU coworkers. And if I could just add, and I apologize, they just had a memorial service for Alex PRETTI yesterday at noon where over 300 employees attended and were able to memorialize and remember him.
Well, Mr. Secretary, I think it's important your words to those employees personally be taken care of. So let me move on. I want to move to a really important discussion as well, because in late December, not long ago, the Trump administration quietly implemented a near-total abortion ban at the VA. VA's final rule prevents the more than 460,000 women veterans of reproductive age, over half of whom live in states with abortion bans, from receiving abortion care at the VA now. VA providers are not even allowed to discuss abortion as an option with veteran patients. Secretary Collins, a simple question. If a veteran has been raped, is she able to get abortion care at the VA under the current policy, yes or no?
Senator Murray, you know that the VA was, up until 22, was not doing any abortions at all. This was a decision by the previous administration to bend the law, to go back something that had been over generations of both Democrat and Republican administrations. The VA was not in the issue of abortion. That is my simple question. That's my simple answer.
No, a simple question. If you are raped, can you get abortion care?
There are no abortions to be done at the VA medical centers except the ones that are the life threatening of a mother. That has been very clear, and that was the process under Obama.
Mr.
It was
Secretary,
under Bush
my
and
time
Clinton
is out.
and
I just want everyone to know that under this VA final rule, no exceptions for rape or for incest, and I find that outrageous. Thank you.
Senator, I want it to be known to everyone listening that up until October or till 22, when Secretary McDonough changed what was the high precedent and law of this country, there were no abortions of any kind for any excuse or any reason done in a VA medical center.
And he rightfully corrected that to make sure that if someone was raped or a victim of incest, they could get health care.
I would just choose it. We probably see it differently.
This hearing took place against one of the most disturbing backdrops in recent American political memory, the killing of Alex PRETTI, an ICU nurse employed by the Department of Veterans Affairs at the Minneapolis VA Medical Center, who was shot and killed by federal agents during what witnesses and video evidence described as an intervention in the assault of a bystander. Before a single fact had been independently verified, before any investigation had concluded, and before his family had been given time to grieve, the Trump administration's response was to go on offense, framing Alex PRETTI as a criminal, labeling him a domestic terrorist, and blaming his death on local government officials who they claimed had failed to cooperate with immigration enforcement. The senators in this hearing, including Senator Slotkin and Senator Murray, refused to let that narrative go unchallenged. What unfolded was not just a political confrontation. It was a moral reckoning about who gets protected in America, who gets believed, and who gets sacrificed on the altar of political narrative. The first and most powerful element of this hearing centers on Secretary Doug Collins and the 30-hour silence that preceded his first public statement on the death of his own employee. In a world where government officials tweet within minutes of any major news event, the fact that the head of the VA, the man who oversees more than 460,000 employees, including Alex PRETTI, took 30 hours to say anything publicly is striking on its own. But what makes it even more striking is what he chose to say when he finally did speak. Rather than acknowledging who Alex PRETTI was, rather than speaking about his service to veterans, rather than expressing any form of directed condolence toward the man's family and colleagues, Secretary Collins used the official VA Twitter account to assign blame. His statement pointed directly at Minnesota state and local officials, claiming that such tragedies were happening because those officials refused to cooperate with federal immigration enforcement. This was not a personal tweet. This was not a grieving man's off-the-cuff reaction. This was an official statement released under the seal and authority of the Department of Veterans Affairs that essentially told the public why Alex Prey died. Before any investigation had reached that conclusion, Senator Slotkin's interrogation on this point was precise and relentless. You weighed in, you said why he died, using your official platform, and then you claim you can't make characterizations. You cannot have it both ways. The question of whether Alex Prey was a domestic terrorist or an assassin, which Collins refused to directly answer, carries enormous weight. Because while Collins hid behind the language of tragedy and "I won't characterize what others said," other cabinet officials had already done exactly that. They had already called Prey a domestic terrorist on national television. Secretary Kristi Noem and advisor Stephen Miller had already gone on record with inflammatory characterizations of a man who had not been convicted of anything, who had not been charged with anything, who, according to every account from people who knew and worked with him, was simply a kind and dedicated nurse who tried to help someone in distress. The senator's point was painfully clear. You had access to his VA file. You had access to all the vetting and background information the VA uses to hire its employees. You knew who this man was better than almost anyone at that table, and you still chose to release a statement blaming local officials rather than standing up for your own employee. That is a choice with moral consequences, and the senators made sure Collins understood that the American people were watching him make it. The memorial controversy adds another deeply troubling layer to this story. An email began circulating, which Collins confirmed he had seen, in which a local leadership official at the Minneapolis VA facility allegedly told employees that they had been instructed by higher-ups not to hold a memorial for Alex Prey. The employees went ahead and held it anyway, with nearly 400 people attending. Collins denied that the order came from his office or from anyone at the table. He suggested the local official may have simply misrepresented what happened, essentially implying she made it up. Senator Slotkin pushed back on this with a phrase that deserves to be remembered. It takes a suspension of disbelief to think that the direct supervisor of the man who was killed just invented a claim that someone above her told her to suppress the memorial. Whether the order came from Collins' office directly or was transmitted through layers of bureaucracy and institutional pressure is something that may never be fully established. But what is established is that the email exists, that Collins acknowledged it, and that the explanation he offered, that a grieving local manager invented a prohibition on mourning, strains credibility in ways that anyone watching could plainly see. Senator Murray's line of questioning shifted the hearing into a second, deeply serious area: the Trump administration's late December implementation of a near-total abortion ban at VA medical facilities. This policy change, which Murray described as quietly implemented, prevents more than 460,000 women veterans of reproductive age from accessing abortion care at the VA. More than half of those women live in states that have already banned abortion at the state level, meaning the VA ban does not leave them with alternative options. But the most striking detail Murray raised was this. Under the new final rule, VA providers are not even permitted to discuss abortion as an option with veteran patients, not to perform it, not even to mention it. And when Murray asked the most straightforward question possible, if a veteran has been raped, can she receive abortion care at the VA? The answer Collins gave was no. There are no abortions at VA facilities except in cases where the mother's life is at risk. No exception for rape. No exception for incest. Collins's attempt to contextualize this by pointing to the pre-2022 policy ignored the fundamental moral weight of the question being asked. Senator Murray made sure that point landed clearly and on the record, even as her time expired. What ties all of these threads together is a single underlying tension that defined this entire hearing: the tension between institutional loyalty and human accountability. Secretary Collins sat at that table as a representative of an administration that had already made its decisions about how to characterize Alex Prey, about immigration messaging, about reproductive health care for veterans. His job in that room was to defend those decisions or, at minimum, not contradict them. And he did that job with practiced evasion, repeating the word tragedy, deflecting to procedural points, historicizing abortion policy back to the Obama era, pointing to the local official as the source of the memorial controversy. What the senators, particularly Slotkin and Murray, did was refuse to let that evasion stand unchallenged. They named what was happening. They read back his own words. They reminded him that the employees of the Minneapolis VA had watched a colleague die, had been subjected to the spectacle of their government calling him a terrorist, and had reportedly been told they couldn't even hold a memorial for him. Those employees deserved a secretary who would fight for them. What they got was a secretary who issued a statement blaming local politicians before the body was cold. And when senators demanded he, at the very minimum, say clearly that Alex Prey was not a terrorist in front of 460,000 VA employees who were watching, he still would not say it. That silence, in many ways, was the loudest thing in the room.